chapter 6:10. But while they have fulfilled their righteousness towards God in their noble deaths, thou shalt miserably cry, Woe is me, for thy unjust slaying of the champions of virtue. And then standing on the brink of death, he said, I am no renegade to the witness borne by my brethren, and I call upon the God of my fathers to be merciful unto my nation, and thee will he punish both in this present life, and after that thou art dead. And with this prayer he cast himself into the red-hot brazier, and so gave up the ghost. If, therefore, the 7 brethren despised the tortures even to the death, it is universally proved that the inspired reason is supreme lord over the passions. For if they had yielded to their passions or sufferings and eaten unclean meat, we should have said that they had been conquered thereby. But in this case it was not so. On the contrary, by the reason which was commended in the sight of God, they rose superior to the passions, and it is impossible to deny the supremacy of the mind, for they won the victory over their passions and their pains. How can we do otherwise than admit right reason's mastery over passion with these men who shrank not before the agonies of burning? For even as towers on harbor moles repulse the assaults of the waves and offer a calm entrance to those entering the haven, so the 7-towered right reason of the youths defended the haven of righteousness and repulsed the tempestuousness of the passions. They formed a holy choir of righteousness as they cheered one another on, saying, Let us die like brothers, O brethren, for the law. Let us imitate the 3 children at the Assyrian court who despised the same ordeal of the furnace. Let us not turn cravens before the proof of righteousness. And one said, Brother, be of good cheer, and another, Bear it out nobly, and another, recalling the past, Remember of what stock ye are, and at whose fatherly hand Isaac, for righteousness' sake, yielded himself to be a sacrifice. And each and all of them together, looking at each other brightly and very boldly, said, With a whole heart will we consecrate ourselves unto God, who gave us our souls, and let us lend our bodies to the keeping of the law. Now remember, in that culture, they have 5 different words of what we call soul. So, yeah. But let us not fear him who thinketh he kills, for a great struggle and peril of the soul awaits in eternal torment those who transgress the ordinance of God. Let us then arm ourselves with divine reason's mastery of the passions. After this, our passion, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob shall receive us, and all our forefathers shall praise us. And to each separate one of the brothers, as they were dragged off, those whose turn it was yet to come back said, Do not disgrace us, brother, nor be false to our brethren already dead. You are not ignorant of the love of brethren, whereof the divine and all-wise providence has given an inheritance to those who were begotten, though their fathers implanting it in them, even through the mother's womb, wherein, brethren, do dwell the like period, and take their form during the same time, and are nourished from the same blood, and are quickened with the same soul, and are brought into the world after the same space, and they draw milk from the same fonts, whereby their fraternal souls are nursed together in arms at the breast, and they are knit yet closer through a common nurture and daily companionship and other education, and through our discipline under the law of God. The feeling of brotherly love being thus naturally strong, the 7 brethren had their mutual concord made yet stronger, for trained in the same law and disciplined in the same virtues, and brought up together in the upright life, they loved one another the more abundantly. Their common zeal for moral beauty and goodness heightened their mutual concord, for in conjunction with their piety, it rendered their brotherly love more fervent. But through nature, companionship, and their virtuous disposition increased the ardor of their brotherly love. Nevertheless, the surviving sons, through their religion, supported the sight of their brethren, who were on the rack, being tortured to death. Nay, more, they even encouraged them to face the agony, so as not only to despise their own tortures, but also to conquer their passion, a brotherly affection for their brethren. Reasoning. O reasoning minds, more kingly than kings, than freemen more free, of harmony of the 7 brethren, holy and well attuned to the keynote of piety. Now we talk about minds, so we got the bodily level and the mental level here. Note of the 7 youths who turned coward, none shrunk in the face of death, and all hastened unto death by torture, as if running the road to immortality. And the emotional level, yet another tool, for as hands and feet move in harmony with those promptings of the soul, so that the holy youths, as if prompted by the immortal soul of religion, went in harmony to death for its sake. Now, if we identify with the part of the soul which is working in unity with God, the state of absolute righteousness, as I call it, undefiled knowledge, as I also call it, but O all holy, 7-fold companionship of brethren in harmony. Remember the Enochian system, you got that sigillium diameth, based, and the Angelorum Bonorum, and a lot of stuff based on 7 within Dr. D and his Squire's Enochian stuff. But for as the 7 days of the creation of the world do enring religion, so did the youths, choir-like, enring their 7-fold companionship, and made the terror of the tortures of no account. We now shudder when we hear of the suffering of those youths, but they, not only seeing it with their eyes, nor merely hearing the spoken and imminent threat, but actually feeling the pang, endured it through, and that in the torture by fire, then, what greater agony can be found? For sharp and stringent is the power of fire, and swiftly did it bring their bodies to dissolution. And think it not wonderful if, with those men, reason triumphed over their tortures, when even a woman's soul despised a yet greater diversity of pains. For the mother of 7 youths endured the torments inflicted on each several one of her children. But consider how manifold are the yearnings of a mother's heart, so that her feeling for her offspring becomes the center of her whole world. And indeed here, even the irrational animals have for their young an affection and love similar to men's. For example, among the birds, the tame ones sheltering under our roofs defend their nestlings, and those that nest upon the mountain tops, and in the rock clefts, and in the holes of trees, and in the branches, and have their young there. Do also drive away the intruder, and then if they be unable to drive him away, they flutter around the nestlings in a passion of love, calling to them in their own speech, and they give succor to their young ones in whatever fashion they can. And what need have we of the examples of the love of offspring among irrational animals, when even the bees, about the season of the making of the comb, fend off intruders and stab with their sting as with a sword those who approach their brood and do battle against them even to their death? But she, the mother of those young men, with a soul like Abraham, was not moved from her purpose by her affection for her children. A comparison of a mother's and a father's affections in this chapter are some mountain peaks of eloquence. Oh, chapter 7, how many verses in chapter 7? 42. O reason of the sons, lord over the passions, O religion that wast dearer to the mother than her children. The mother, having two choices before her, religion and the present, saving alive her 7 sons according to the tyrant's promise, loved rather than religion, which saved unto eternal life according to God. Loved rather religion. Well, no, you can love both, and you could be doing this for your children. I have heard from people, from Asian Americans, by Asian Americans I mean people who have immigrated from Asia, that to save their kids from the war and gangs and stuff like this, they would make it harder for their kids to be kidnapped by chaining them or something, either when the troops showed up or whatever. And so, often this is out of love for your children. You don't want them programmed to the enemy to hate to hate their ancestry and to hate religion and all this other stuff. They would rather have their kids killed by the troops. But the fault lies on the troops, not the mother. It wasn't, and they might have killed them anyways. So same thing sort of here. The sort of people who would do this. Oh, how may I express the passionate love of parents for children? We stamp a marvelous likeness of our soul and of our shape on the tender nature of the child, and most of all through the mother's sympathy with her children being deeper than the father's. For women are softer of soul than men, and the more children they bear, the more they do abound in love for them. But of all mothers, she of the 7 sons abounded in love beyond the rest, seeing that, having in 7 childbearings, felt maternal tenderness for the fruit of her womb, and having been constrained because of the many pangs in which she bore each to a close affection, she, nevertheless, through the fear of God, rejected the present safety of her children, the more than that, through the moral beauty and goodness of her sons and their obedience to the law, her maternal love for them was made stronger, for they were just and temperate and brave and great-souled, and lovers of each other and of their mothers in such manner that they obeyed her in the keeping of the law, even unto death. But, nevertheless, though she had many great temptations to yield to her maternal instincts, no single instance did the dreadful variety of tortures have power to alter her reason, but the mother urged each son separately and all together to die for their religion. And so, Aleister Crowley talks about the mother, father, child stage. So the mother stage is, this it's based on stories and feelings and emotions and relationships. And O holy nature and parental love, and yearning of parents for offspring and wages of nursing, and unconquerable affection of mothers. The mother, seeing them one by one racked and burned, remained unshaken in soul for religion's sake. She saw the flesh of her sons being consumed in the fire, and the extremities of their hands and feet scattered on the ground, and the flesh covering torn off from their hands right to their cheeks, strewn about like masks. O mother, who now knew sharper pangs than the pangs of labor, O woman, alone among women, the fruit of whose womb was the perfect religion, thy firstborn giving up the ghost did not alter thy resolution, nor thy second looking with eyes of pity on thee under his tortures, nor thy third breathing out his spirit. Neither didst thou weep when thou beheldest the eyes of each amid the torments, looking boldly on the same anguish, and sawest in their quivering nostrils the signs of approaching death, when thou sawest the flesh of one son being severed after the flesh of another, and hand after hand being cut off, and head after head being flayed, and the corpse cast upon corpse, and the place crowded with spectators on account of tortures of thy children, thou sheddest not a tear, not the melodies of the sirens, nor the songs of swans with sweet sound do so charm the hearer's ears as sounded the voices of the son speaking to the mother from amid the torments. How many and how great were the tortures with which the mother was tormented while her sons were being tortured with the torments of rack and fire. But inspired reason lent her heart a man's strength under her passion of suffering and exalted her to make no account of the present yearnings of mother love. And although she saw the destruction of her 7 children and the many and varied forms of their torments, the noble mother willingly surrendered them through faith in God. For she beheld in her own mind, even as it had been cunning advocates in a council chamber, nature and parenthood and mother love and her children on the rack, and it was as if she, the mother, having the choice between 2 votes in the case of her children, one for their death and one to save them alive, therefore regarded not the saving of her 7 sons for a little time, but as a true daughter of Abraham, called to mind his God-fearing courage. O mother of the race, vindicator of our law, defender of our religion, and winner of the prize in the struggle within thyself. O woman, nobler to resist than men, braver than warriors to endure. For as the ark of Noah with the whole living world for her burden in the world whelming deluge did withstand the mighty surges, so thou, the keeper of the law, beaten upon every side by the surging waves of the passions, and strained as with the strong blast by the tortures of thy sons, didst nobly weather the storms that assailed thee for religion's sake. Now, the father stage in Aleister Crowley's way of thinking about human development and responsibility, or whatever you want to call it, the father stage is about those rules and skills and commandments and stuff that you get out of, religion and everything else. Thus, then, if one, both a woman and advanced in years, and the mother of 7 sons, endured the sight of her children being tortured to death, the inspired reason must confessedly be supreme ruler over the passions. I have proved accordingly that not only have men triumphed over their sufferings, but that a woman also has despised the most dreadful tortures, and not so fierce were the lions around Daniel, not so hot was the burning fiery furnace of Michael. Oh, it says Mishael, which is a variation of Michael, so even if that's a misprinting, that's fine, because you have Mikal, Mukal, Mishal, Mushal, are the 4 variations of that. Now, people add the Y when you get to the Hebrew with a lot of the angel names. So Yal ending. They don't Yah. They don't really do that, I don't think. But Mishal is silk of God. Mikal, Michael is who is like God. It's sort of like asking the question. But you could say character trait of taking in the taming of God. Well, there's, anyways, that's for a different point. Burden of Satan's motherhood at the sight of her son being tortured. But her religion-guided reason, the mother quenched her passions, many and strong as they were. For there is this also to consider, that had the woman been weak of spirit, despite her motherhood, she might have wept over them, and perchance spoken thus, Ah, thrice wretched me, and more than thrice wretched. 7 children have I borne, and am left childless. In vain was I 7 times with child, and to no profit was my 10 months' burden. 7 times born and fruitless have been my nursings, and sorrowful my sucklings. In vain for you, O my sons, did I endure the many pangs of labor and the more difficult cares of your upbringing. Alas for my sons, that some were yet unwed, and those that were wedded had begotten no children. I shall never see children of yours, nor shall I be called by the name of grandparent. Ah me, that had many beautiful children, and am a widow and desolate in my woe. Neither will there be any son to bury me when I am dead. But the holy and God-fearing mother wailed not with the lamentation over any one of them, neither besought she any to escape death, nor lamented over them as dying men. But though she had a soul of adamant, and were bringing forth the number of her sons for a second time into immortal life, she besought rather and entreated of them that they should die for religion's sake. O mother, warrior of God, in the cause of religion, old and a woman, thou didst both defeat the tyranny by thy endurance, and wast found stronger than a man in deeds as well as words. For verily, when thou wast put in bonds with thy sons, thou stoodest there, seeing Eleazar being tortured, and thou spakest to thy sons in the Hebrew tongue. That could be entirely the translator, perhaps they're saying, because if this was in Aramea, because this is when this book came from, it would have been spelled basically Arymy. Anyways, it would have been spelled to pronounce Aramea, and those aren't the names of the letters, but Aleph, Lam, Lamed, there's no K at the end. It's Y, A basically at the end. Thou stoodest there, seeing Eleazar being tortured, and thou spakest to thy sons in the Hebrew tongue. Okay, my sons, noble is the fight. And do ye, being called thereto, to bear witness for our nation, fight therein zealously on behalf of the law of the fathers? For it would be shameful if, while this aged man endured the agony for religion's sake, you that are young men shrank before the pain. Remember that for the sake of God ye have come into the world, and have enjoyed life, and that therefore ye owe it to God to endure all pain for his sake. For whom also our father Abraham made haste to sacrifice his son Isaac, the ancestor of our nation. And Isaac, seeing his father's hand lifted the knife against him, did not shrink. And Daniel, the just man, was cast to the lions. And Ananias, Azarias, and Mishael were flung into the furnace of fire, and they endured for God's sake. Now, it turns out that at least a century before the Jews and Christians say Daniel was a figure that they seem to have another Daniel, that this would have been derived from, or at least rewritten to reflect something later. Endure for God's sake. And ye also, having the same faith unto God, be not troubled, for it were against reason that ye, knowing righteousness, should not withstand the pains. For these words, the mother of the seven encouraged every single one of her sons to die rather than transgress the ordinance of God. They themselves, also knowing well that men dying for God live unto God, as live Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and all the patriarchs. Chapter 8, the famous athletes of righteousness. Here ends the story of courage, called the fourth book of Maccabees, 34 verses. Some of the guards declared that when she also was about to be seized and put to death, she cast herself on the pyre in order that no man might touch her body. O mother, that together with thy 7 sons didst break the tyrant's force, and bring to naught his evil devices, and gavest an example of the noblest of faith, thou wert nobly set as a roof upon thy sons, as pillars, and the earthquake of the torments shook thee not at all. Rejoice, therefore, pure-souled mother, having the hope of thy endurance certain at the hand of God. Not so majestic stands the moon amid the stars in heaven, as thou, having lit the path of thy 7 star-like sons into righteousness, standest in honor with God, and thou art set in heaven with them. For thy childbearing was from the son of Abraham, and had it been lawful for us to paint us, as might some artist, the tale of thy piety, would not the spectators have shuddered at the mother of 7 sons suffering for righteousness' sake, multitudinous tortures even unto death, and indeed it were fitting to inscribe these words over the resting place, speaking for a memorial to the future generations of our people. Here lie an aged priest and a woman full of years and her 7 sons through the violence of a tyrant, desiring to destroy the Hebrew nation. They vindicated the rights of our people, looking unto God and enduring the torments even unto death. Because remember, calling it Judaism well, I mean, that's not the pronunciation, but calling it Judaism was something that started during the Maccabean period. Although we can trace this religion to the influence of the Moabeds mixing with some other factors around 540 BCE. Some don't trace it that far back, but the evidence that I've looked at, 540, looks at the earliest possible date, and that's fine with me. For truly it was a holy war which was fought by them. For on that day virtue, proving them through endurance, set before them the prize of victory in incorruption, in everlasting life. But the first in the fight was Eleazar, and the mother of the 7 sons played her part, and the brethren fought. The tyrant was their adversary, and the world and the life of man were the spectators. And righteousness won the victory, and gave the crown to her athletes. Who but wondered at the athletes of the true law, who were not amazed at them? The tyrant himself and his whole council admired their endurance, whereby they now do both stand beside the throne of God and live the blessed age. For Moses says, all also who have sanctified themselves are under thy hands. And these men, therefore, having sanctified themselves for God's sake, not only have received this honor, but also the honor that through them the enemy had no more power over our people, and the tyrant suffered punishment, and our country was purified, they having as it were become a ransom for our nation's sin, and through the blood of these righteous men and the propitiation of their death, the divine providence delivered Israel, that before was evil entreated. And when the tyrant Antiochus saw the heroism of their virtue and their endurance under the tortures, he publicly held up their endurance to his soldiers as an example. And he thus inspired his men with a sense of honor and heroism on the field of battle and in the labors of besieging, so that he plundered and overthrew all his enemies. O Israelites, children born of the seed of Abraham, obey this law and be righteous in all ways, recognizing that inspired reason is Lord over the passions and over pains, not only from within, but from without ourselves, by which means these men, delivering up their bodies to the torture for righteousness' sake, not only won the admiration of mankind, but were deemed worthy of a divine inheritance. And through them the nation obtained peace, and restoring the observance of the law in our country, hath captured the city from the enemy. And vengeance hath pursued the tyrant Antiochus upon earth, and in death he suffers punishment. For when he failed utterly to constrain the people of Jerusalem to live like Gentiles and abandon the customs of our fathers, he thereupon left Jerusalem and marched away against the Persians. Now these are the words that the mother of the 7 sons, the righteous woman, spake to her children. I was a pure maiden, and I strayed not from my father's house, and I kept guard over the rib that was builded unto Eve. No seducer of the desert, no deceiver in the field corrupted me, nor did the false beguiling serpent sully the purity of my maidenhood. I lived with my husband all the days of my youth, but when these my sons were grown up, their father died. Happy was he, for he lived a blessed life with children, and he never knew the pain of their loss, who, while he was yet with us, taught you the law and the prophets. He read to us of Abel, who was slain by Cain, and of Isaac, who was offered as a burnt offering, and of Joseph in the prison. Now, if you look at the versions of Tanakh that currently exist, Abraham had a 14-year-old son which would have made more sense that he went off into the wilderness saying hunting. Some toddler who can barely talk. Where do you like to go hunting? I'm going to leave my teenager at home and take the toddler. Toddler's not going to be able to help. Going to be more of a hindrance. I mean, maybe you do take your toddler, but, as a burnt offering. And of Joseph in the prison. And he spake to us of Phinehas, the zealous priest, and he taught you the song of Ananias, Azarias, and Mishael in the fire. And he glorified also Daniel in the den of lions, and blessed him, and he called to your minds the saying of Isaiah, Yea, even though thou pass through the fire, the flame shall not hurt thee. Now, in the in what they call the New Testament, there's more quotes of Scripture, so it's not really weird when the Book of Mormon does it. That's not really an argument. It's like they quote the Bible too much. It's like, well, even though thou pass through the fire, the flame shall not hurt thee. Well, they don't hurt the eternal being. He sang to us the words of David, the psalmist. Many are the afflictions of the just. He quoted to us the Proverbs of Solomon. He is a tree of life to all them that do his will. He confirmed the words of Ezekiel. Shall these dry bones live? For he forgot not the song that Moses taught, which teaches, I will slay, and I will make alive, and this is your life, and the blessedness of your days. All cruel was the day, and yet not cruel, when the cruel tyrant of the Greeks set the fire blazing for his barbarous braziers, and with his passions boiling, brought to the catapult, and back again to his tortures, the 7 sons of the daughter of Abraham, and blinded the eyeballs of their eyes, and cut out their tongues, and slew them with many kinds of torment, for which cause the judgment of God pursued, and shall pursue the accursed wretch. But the sons of Abraham with their victorious mother are gathered together into the place of their ancestors, having received pure and immortal souls from God, to whom be the glory forever and ever. And typically when you hear phrases like that, you Amen, Amen, as the ancient Egyptians would have said. Amen, as the Greeks would have said.